Today's readings are about ideology and hegemony. I pulled out particularly a quote from Gitlin. If hegemony explains everything in the sphere of culture, it explains nothing, which is important for us to consider as we talk about ideology and hegemony and television's place in these concepts. So to start us off, ideology. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning of this semester. I'm going to expand that definition and understanding a little bit today. Ideology is an underlying set of conscious and unconscious ideas which make up one's beliefs, goals, expectations, and motivation. Ideology is something that we are not generally aware that we have or that we believe in, but it is underlying our everyday motivations, our everyday actions, words, and interactions with other people. Ideology can be based off of religion, in part. It's based off of our national and social culture. It is based off of our familial ties and what we've learned from those, and in our schooling. And these beliefs and ideas are the products of social practice. So we live them out, they've been lived out upon us, and we embody them in ourselves. Therefore, any communication being something that we do, something that we embody, we physically talk, we construct television programs, etc., are ideological in nature, and generally not consciously so. So our beliefs are embedded in all of the art that we create, film, television, writing, etc., and generally, it's not conscious. Those are unconscious beliefs. There are times, Hartley would argue, that it is very much consciously created, that we are purposely going in with the mind of, oh, I want the audience to get X out of that content. And we build and construct in the hopes of procuring that ideology, that mindset from the audience. It may or may not work out, right? But regardless of whether we're consciously trying to do it or if it's unconsciously being done because we have beliefs and they form everything that we do, ideology is under there. So, how ideology functions. Ideology is not manufactured through cultural industries or commercial culture. It is not something created from TV programs, media, etc. Instead, these TV programs, video games, other media content take the ideology that the people who created them have, and it relays that or transmits it to a new audience where it is reproduced, and the audience then processes it and packages it and decides whether or not they're going to take it or not, if they're going to reject that ideology that's been presented to them, or if they're going to accept it and incorporate it into themselves. So I want to be clear that television and any kind of cultural artifact, commercial or otherwise, does not innately create ideology. It is, in fact, only relaying an ideology that already existed in the person who created that content. And that generally is, for Gitlin, social elites. People who have enough money to be able to spend on creating cultural artifacts. Now, in television land, the people we're going to talk about is producers, showrunners, but it's also in directors and actors and costumers and lighting technicians, right? All of those people can subtly inform the ideology of a program. Of course, the most impactful are the showrunners, the producers, and the writing room. Okay, so if television ideology does things through what? And the answer to that is, for Gitlin, through format and formula. The format being the 30 minutes, the 60 minutes, the daily, the weekly, and the commercial or non-commercial. Is this public broadcasting, or is this for a for-profit network? For the formula, he's talking about narrative structure. Is it episodic? Is it serial? Is it a flexi narrative? And how does those things allow for certain ideologies to grow or expand, or if they have to be cycled through and repeated? For genre tropes, conventions, and expectations all relay towards ideology. If you think, of course, Western is the most iconic with the black and the white hats, being very clear markers of good and bad, and who embodies the black and white hats, right? Make clear ideological distinctions. More modernized version of genre and ideology in television would be something like science fiction or crime dramas, where clearly the police or the humans are coded as being good and moralistic, etc., and the aliens or the criminals are coded as being bad or whatnot. The setting and character types go towards that genre. They're embedded in that, but then there's also additional stereotypes that get folded in that aren't necessarily part of genre conventions, especially with flexi narratives where they have an episodic and a long-term storyline, that there is more flexibility in character types there. Slant is the idea that you're legitimizing depolitical forms of deviance or delegitimizing the dangerous or the violent. So every television program, according to Gitlin, has an option of two slants. One being that you are promoting depolitical forms of deviance. So for that is you are encouraging the acceptance of diversity in race and sex and gender and orientation and all of these things. Those are those deviances, and he's making them. He argues that the television programs depoliticize them, they make them normalized, and therefore no longer an issue. Or the opposite, they are delegitimizing or making an issue out of the dangerous or the violent, generally the criminal, right? And we can talk about all the ways in which that delegitimizing the dangerous or the violent, making the criminal to be non-moral or unethical, not because they broke the law, but because they are intrinsically bad or immoral or non-godly. See the difference? That might not be clear. The idea here is that by saying all criminals are bad, they're not saying criminals are bad because they broke the law. They're saying criminals are bad and therefore they broke the law. That was natural to them. And of course, doing that kind of slant is so problematic, right? Because people break the law for all sorts of reasons, some of them very moralistic. Break the law or my kid dies. So it's a very black and white and severely problematic slants that he has defined in television, and one can make the argument that there are, in fact, alternative slants available to us now in the 21st century. And then finally, he has the solution. This is the resolution of a narrative. And this is where we have the polysemy, polyvalence thing going on. So the resolution of the narrative, either it's episodic or it's serial, doesn't really matter. But the idea that you could have audiences have various interpretations of that resolution, because it's ambiguous enough to allow for audiences to have various interpretations, or you're going to have one resolution that everybody can agree on, this is what happened, but some audiences will like that resolution and others will not. Okay. So according to Gitlin, and I think this is actually true, ideology is not created by commercial media texts, but it is in fact transmitted, relayed from one content creator, human, through the media text to other humans who can then take or reject that ideology embedded in that media text. You embed ideology into television through a variety of things, including format and formula, the genre conventions, including setting and character type, the slant that you're taking, which can be either depoliticizing forms of deviance, i.e., let's all be friends, kumbaya, diversity is wonderful, which it is, by the way, or making criminals criminals not because they have broken the law, but because they are inherently bad and therefore they broke the law. Those are the two slants that he has devised. One can certainly make arguments that there are a variety of other slants available to you in television nowadays, especially as our ideology has become more morally gray. And finally, he talks about the solution, the resolution of the narrative, and the polysemy, polyvalence didactic. Okay. Which brings us to The Simpsons and Money Bart. This is season 23, episode 3. Banksy has gotten the episode of The Simpsons, and he gets to review the opening credits. So I wanted you guys to look at what are the two ideologies being presented in the opening, which is the dominant and which is the oppositional, and how do you know that? So think about those things, and we will talk about that again after this clip.